All right, so I can't even believe this is happening right now. We're about to talk all sorts of goodness, and I'm not going to start until I bring out the great Jaime Jameson and the legend himself, Jim Starlin. Let's hear it for him. We would not have the universe of comics today without the people on this stage, and that makes me so very happy. How you doing, guys?
Good.
Yeah, let's get into it. We have limited time. Let's go. Okay, so how many of you know this new Dreadstar book that just dropped? How many of you are about to know this new Dreadstar book that just dropped? There we go. So this book was a beautiful collaboration between these two, and it was done in the most punk rock way. They got to make this book themselves with their creativity using so much comic infrastructure and knowledge. So I want to know, when you first got the idea, what was it like going, hey, we're going to do this our way, not go to the big two, this is a punk rock character, let's go. What was the process?
Well, to start off with, I hadn't drawn in 3 years because I had blown a hole in my hand. And,
there's twists.
It was gross.
Yes, it took me a while to get it operating again, and then it took this lady here to annoy me enough to do a drawing. She kept bugging me for a sketch, not for Thanos, Dr. Doom. And so I was trying to ignore her for the longest time, but she's not easy to ignore. And once I got that and found I could draw, through a series of events, I found she could ink really well, and I pressed her on to becoming the inker on Dreadstar, which was your first full book.
Full graphic novel, yes.
First full book, period, and it was 100 pages long.
Yeah.
So nothing intimidating about that, was
He
it?
fails to mention that I used to ink for Keith Giffen, and Keith was notorious for deciding at the last minute, I don't want to go to the show. So I showed up to a show and had nothing to do because I was going to ink Keith Giffen. So he was like, well, if I do some bad drawings, will you make them look good with your inks? Like, let's see what you can do. And that's how it started.
And they surprised me. They were really good.
Yeah, he was like, maybe we could sell these.
So she was on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast, and we went to a convention together in Mexico City, and we were 25 pages or so into the book, and you came back and you got COVID.
Really badly.
Really badly. So we had a little interruption in that, and we got back to it again, and you got COVID a second time. Anything to get out of work.
Really badly.
Yeah.
Like almost dying badly this time.
So this book was really an odyssey and a test on everything we did here. So it's more than a labor of love, it's blood, sweat, and tears.
I quit about 50 times in. 50 times.
When you pick up a comic, you think like it's difficult, there's a lot on the page, there's a lot going on, but the level of difficulty in the last 2 years plus these very specific occurrences. But what I love about comics, me personally, is it's such a direct through line from the creators to the consumers. There's such a small credits page. Like you look at a movie and you're watching credits and credits and credits, and we're gonna talk post-credits in a minute, a certain Eternals post-credit scene, don't you worry. But with credits, it's an artist, an inker, a writer, and maybe 5 other names. What did you feel came from your soul that made you love Vanth so much? And what did you find in working with that character so long that made you go like, oh, this is a piece of me?
Let's see. Well, Vanth, he's kind of an idiot in some ways. Like he's a destroyer of worlds while meaning to do well. I kind of just fell in love with, like, I love Eddie. Eddie's probably my favorite out of the group. He seems to be probably the smartest out of the bunch, other than Willow. But and then
He's the most human.
Yes, he's the cat guy. Is the most human of them all.
Worth noting, he's a cat person.
Yes.
Most human.
Most human is the cat person. And then you've got Two-Tone, who's just an imbecile with a big heart. So I mean, you kind of fall in love with the characters because they are so different, and it's kind of like Seinfeld. None of them actually seem like they would be friends, but they are, and they do it together with Galaxy cereal.
And Jim, you've described him as an anarchist without a second act, which is such, like I said, this is a punk rock book. That's such a cool log line. Again, you're now going to know Dreadstar. What's it like for you to write a character that's always like the ultimate cop on the edge? Like this is like Martin Riggs to 1,000.
Well, there's a certain autobiographical quality to
Vanth looks just like
I'm really good at breaking things and not fixing them also. But You know, he's like going back to seeing an old friend. It was like 20 some odd years between the last book that I did and coming back to this. And it was doing a transition, so I wanted them to have that 25 years also and show what they have all been doing during that time and how they have worked themselves into the system that they inadvertently created at the end of my last run. And it was fun because it was all these little things that 20 years later I looked at and said, you know, this one character that was in the story, I was never satisfied with what happened to or her. I'm not going to give that part away. And so this character is brought back in as a sort of the central threat, but he's not a menace or a thing, he's a threat. And
don't give too much away, Jimmy. You might still want to get the book.
His relationship to the rest of them is really kind of interesting.
So before we get to spoilers, because obviously you need to read the book, I do want to talk spoilers for another thing. A minute ago I mentioned credits. I'm going to spoil a certain post-credit scene. You guys might know what I'm talking about. How many of you have seen Eternals? Should we talk about two characters at the end of Eternals that might have something to do with this gentleman on stage? Okay,
Who would that be?
How many Harrys are in this audience? That feels good. That feels good right here. What was it like to see a scene with two characters that are that specific to you? These are not Spider-Man or Batman. These are Eros and Pip the Troll, as played by Patton Oswalt and Harry Styles. What was it like to see the first time on a 70-foot screen?
Well, to tell you the truth, we couldn't make it to the premiere. I had a family obligation I had to get to, so the day after the premiere, everyone on the planet started calling me up and saying, Pip, Eros, Pip, Eros. And so it took me a while to actually get to see the film. And the tricky part was, it was easy to find things online about what Harry Styles looked like as Eros, but you couldn't find Pip. And I kept looking around, and finally I found this one shot that was from a design studio. And it was this guy, this big hunk of a guy in armor with these pointy ears. And it was for something, it was a design for an outfit for him that they never used. And all I could think of is, this is Pip the Hunk.
Yeah, exactly. Sexy Pip the Troll.
Is that?
Yes, and finally when I actually saw the show and he falls down on his face with a stein of beer in his hand, I said, that's right, that's the way it should be. So I was pleased.
And that's how you introduced those two characters, and that was such a great, like, where are we going to go from here? Like, that's one of my favorite post-credit scenes in the MCU. But you also have your hand in another post-credit scene in the MCU. There's a guy, he snaps a lot, like a West Side Story thing. What was it like for you knowing before the rest of us how this trajectory of Marvel was going to go? Because you invented a character that I never thought my grandma would call me about. And now my grandma and I talk about Thanos.
No, I always thought he was too dark and esoteric, and it was just too strange to realize that he was actually going up there. And then I did this little cameo between the two films when they were shooting it, and the writers and the director, Joe Russo's, like, told me everything. I mean, you know, they figured I had to sign the non-disclosure form also, so I was fair game to talk to.
And they're excited to get to talk about it.
And I had to keep my mouth shut for a year and a half, 2 years, about what they had told me because I had signed a non-disclosure. In fact, I was told that I was the only person who they've ever had do a cameo who actually kept his mouth shut about it.
But you should ask him about his cameo.
I mean, we're looking at you, Tom Holland, but also your cameo.
Oh, no, about recording that cameo.
Yeah, no, I got to know, because you were not just with the Russos themselves on both sides of the camera, one of them next to you, but also you're with Captain America, someone you've worked with abstractly, and now you're working with linearly. What was it like filming an Avengers movie?
It was surreal, like everything else involved in this damn business. Chris kept jumping up and checking his phone between takes because I think he had some money down on a football game.
Go Pats.
So everybody left him alone every time he jumped up, and there was a number of other people there who were working, actors who And I kept asking questions, like they had this big globe thing for setting up the exposures and that, and I asked what that was, and one of the actors next to me said, "Is this your first time on the set?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "How did you get this gig the first time?" And I said, "Oh, I sort of wrote this thing this is all based on." And he gave me this really skeptical look, and it just happened. Joe Russo's walking by, and he went, "He did," and kept right on going. So it was, like I said, it's been surreal since the beginning.
And now you write very cosmic and existential work, and your inks allow that depth to really sing. There's a lot in these books that feel very esoteric and out there, and you're kind of living that lifestyle, talking about all your set experiences, making these things. The world's a lot. What do you think inspires each of your brains to go to that very otherworldly place in your creative work? Do you have a process? Do you sit down in the morning, have some coffee, have some other things?
I have insane dreams. I have the most vivid, insane dreams, and that's where some of my stories and my writing comes from. Like, I mean, I told him about mine last night, and he was like, "That's really messed up. That's dark." I was like, "Yeah, but it was like, this is a story somewhere.
Put it in the art."
Yes.
And also our process has been changing as we go along.
Yeah.
We've been becoming more collaborative. Actually, I'm 4 pages done from finishing the next pencils on the next book, which is Dreadstar versus the Inevitable, which is kind of a pandemic story, but it's not a pandemic. And we keep collaborating more and more on these things until the one that we're following, we're going to co-write
the third book will be the
together.
co-writing. And also Willow. I mean, Willow, Dreadstar was before my time. I did know of Dreadstar.
She didn't like Willow.
I was like, I'm sorry, she is not sexy. So I was like, let's update her. I bombarded him with pictures of boots, hairstyles, outfits. I'm talking hundreds and hundreds. He was so annoyed, but we got
had
it right.
JPEGs coming on my ears of hairstyles.
I was like, no, now she's sexy. And he's like, well, she looked like a Gibson girl back then. You mean Debbie Gibson? I mean, hello, what's a Gibson girl?
Charles
now I
Gibson.
know.
I did ask about Harry Styles fans. There's a leap to Gibson girl, I think, from those two things.
Yeah.
Even for me.
Turn of the last century illustrator.
So-
I'm old style. What can I tell you?
It's interesting seeing how the things from different decades influence modern art. And I learned something today, just now backstage. I'm a 90s kid. I grew up, Maximum Carnage is one of my favorite runs of Spider-Man. Huge Maximum Carnage fan. How many of you got the Doppelganger Funko Pop? That exclusive Funko? I gotta know, what was, the man invented Doppelganger on top of all of these other things, and that wasn't, you didn't think that would come back in any way?
No. He didn't make it through the first issue of the Infinity War. I think he ended up on a picket fence somewhere. Ron and I decided we were just going to do doppelgangers of all the evil doppelgangers of all the characters, and he was one of the first ones that designed up because I killed him off early on in the story. And to come here and see him on a pop, that was a real surprise, to say the least.
Yeah, when the first person brought it up, he was like, wait.
Aren't you dead?
Where did this come from?
And for you experiencing the medium of comic books evolve, because you've been in it in so many different mediums, you've been exposed to comics in so many different ways, is there anything that you're experiencing coming out of the pandemic back to this world of cons that you're seeing as a positive change to the industry as a whole?
Well, I think people are more, like, they had time to sit and read or catch up, and like they were bored. So they, like, younger kids are more familiar with the older comics. I mean, there was like a 5-year-old kid that knew more about the history of Batman. I was just like, wait, what? He's telling me all this stuff, and I'm just like floored that this kid knew. He's like, well, I was home a lot. I was just like, that seems to be a very common thing after this pandemic. So maybe younger people are catching up.
We're gonna learn about Gibson girls, and so we're gonna get them.
Yep.
Any experience for you, Jim, that surprised you post-pandemic? Like at these, we've done 2 cons recently. Anything you've noticed as like a change in the pulse in the comic book culture?
It's lower key. It's not as people aren't not in your faces. Beside the point. I've discovered if I want to go incognito, all I have to do is put a baseball cap on.
They still
And
recognize
no one
him.
knows who I am then. You know, the folks who are here are more appreciative of what you're doing now. I think everybody's got a deeper sense of their own mortality and appreciation for life. And so the things you enjoy more.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess I don't know about you guys, but this has been a game changer for me, realizing how much I love this. This world is so special, and each and every one of you, us all gathering for this, is just so magical. But on the other side, this guy killed Robin. So I want to know what it's like to be told, hey, this isn't going so well, what do you want to do? And actually have the fans decide the fate of a pretty big character. What was it like? You wrote 2 versions, I think?
There was 2 pages at the end that were alternate, you know, where he survives in that I never figured he was going to survive. I'm sorry, but I know what ghouls you guys are. And I figured it was going to be overwhelmingly killed a little stinker. But it was statistically, out of 10,000 votes, statistically it was tied. There was only like 70 votes determining the difference. And I was down in Mexico at the time and hanging out with some friends and didn't do any voting on myself. And when I came back and found out how close it was, I was, whoop, really?
71. I'm killing Robin.
But I did get a lot of free beers the next time I went down there because I was the guy who killed off Robin.
Comics have been dark for a while.
Yeah.
Now this book in itself is very dark because there's nihilistic elements. There's elements, like we said, not a second act. When you're writing and illustrating a book that you're controlling to this level, do you ever find yourself a few pages in or a few panels in and going like, oh, no, I don't want to do that?
He added 2 pages in the midst after, and I'm talking way into the 70s of this book. Oh, I'm going to add a new 9 and 10. It threw my numbering off so bad. So I'm sitting here looking, I'm missing a page here. I didn't get the scan. But I've done them all. I've sent them to you. And the numbering just got all screwed up. And also his writing of the numbers. A 7 looks like a 2. A 4 looks like a 7. Yeah, adding those 2 pages.
You wouldn't believe the complaining I've been listening to for the last few weeks.
It's a dense medium. There's a lot to do. Now, when you're releasing these books, and this is one of my moments of pride, is I got to hold the hardcover before the inker, and as a journalist, we don't get that very often. But getting to experience the books in physical form after going, you know, in the old days, it was mailing the books pages across the country, getting inks and all that jazz. And now we're scanning, we're doing more coloring digitally and all that. What's it like as a creator to hold these books and see your kids come to life in a way? What's that first experience like?
Well, we were probably the last ones that got to flip through our book. We were doing, actually, you were with us the first time we got to see our book. We hadn't seen it, so we're like, oh, what does our book look like?
I was there for the birth.
Yes, he was. We had no idea. We were doing an interview with Coy, and I was like, oh, look at this page. Like, what should we hold up? Like, flipping through, and he's like, we have to do the interview. Well, like, I want to see the book.
Coy's asking you questions, and we're ignoring him, looking through the book.
Do you see this? I know, I'm asking about it. I do see this. Also, I have to mention, I mention it in every interview, there's a 2-page spread in Dreadstar that is one of the most cosmic, time warpy, crazy. If you're a fan of cosmic Marvel, if you're a fan of existential dread DC, there's this insane, trippy page that is like mind warping and altering. When you're illustrating something like that, what's the conversation back and forth with you adding depth to something that's surrealistic?
This is funny. I went behind, and he was like, well, I meant it to go over, but I was like, well, I thought it looked better under, and I couldn't tell what was going on. It was like being on acid.
Over, under, through, reality?
Yeah, it literally was like, oh, well, it does work that way. I kind of like that.
But I do the coloring, so I get the final say on what goes on top.
But then I tell him, that doesn't look right. Can you fix that?
And she does.
And this is the stuff you don't see from comic creators. It's so fascinating. We're like, oh yeah, I'm sure they just mail each other stuff. Cut to like over, under, through, color, black, red. Maybe Batman's been purple this whole time and we've never known. Now,
we had one page where I was on, my notes on the thing was a strange creature. And we were texting back and forth, said, what kind of strange creature do you think I ought to do? And she sent me a list of them.
I said it should be a combination of a Venus flytrap and this and that. I mean, I sent like 20 things. I was like, I can combine it. And it was so cool. I was like, this is going to be so cool. But then he goes and has to top it off by adding an eyeball, a floating eyeball. And I was like, I didn't say to add a floating eyeball.
It was mine. That's mine.
Always has to top me off.
I mean, who doesn't love a good floating eyeball? Now, in this world, to me, the closest parallel to the big two books is your work on Marvel, and that is so formative to not just Phase 4, but I think the whole direction we're going, Phase 5 and beyond. What was it like working on a book that was so mainstream and making it so not mainstream at the time?
Well, it was on its way to the extinction, actually. I was given that book with the determination that I might be able to get the first issue out before they canceled it. Because it was part of a wave of new books that they had put out, and the first two issues had really tanked, and they said this is never going to last. And I had just been fired off Iron Man, and so they said go and do whatever you want. And I found that if you take books that nobody's looking at, you can do whatever you want and have a lot of fun. And strangely enough, they begin to sell. And so Captain Marvel stayed around, and after that it was Warlock, because nobody wanted to do Warlock either, because he had already he had already gone down the drain. So I found that the dead ones are the best ones to play with.
Lesson to creators: find the stuff no one's looking at, make it crazy.
Well, I think he was also trying to hide under the radar from Stan and stuff. I think he didn't mention that he got fired and then snuck his way to keep the job by doing something else.
That's a good point.
And actually, it's something that other folks have done. Frank Miller started off on Daredevil, and nobody cared about Daredevil at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was on the life support title.
Actually, yeah, this is a great place to speak about Stan. What was it like working for Stan the Man?
Stan was surreal. Stan was an actor who got sidetracked at 17 into becoming an editor because his uncle owned a business, and he never got over it. And that's why you see him in all these cameos throughout. At his memorial, Paul Bettany, who plays the Vision, said Stan has been in more movies than he will have been himself throughout his entire career. And it was true. And so Stan finally was a teenage boy who got his dream later on in life through the most circuitous route that you can imagine.
Sometimes you have to invent your entire universe to put yourself in it, but that's how you put yourself in it. Now, speaking of Stan and this year's movies at Marvel, Shang-Chi was maybe my biggest, I'm really excited for this, but just blew me out of the water. It went places. What'd you guys both think of Shang-Chi, the first experience through?
I mean, we were with you.
Yeah,
that first scene, the fight scene between the two, not the bus scene, that is really, really mad cool. But the first actual fight scene, that was just so, the choreography was just
sensual.
Beautiful. Very just beautiful. And I thought that the fact that these people actually studied martial arts and it was real martial art fighting. It wasn't like actors just acting like they knew how to do it. I thought that was so essential, and I thought they did such a great job. I had very low expectations. He will back me up on that. I was not as excited, and then I left so happy and blown away.
Yeah, everybody kept saying, no, this one's not going to work. This one's not going to work. You're going to lose out on this one. And I'm going, I don't know. The director's pretty cool. They got a humorous writer on it. We'd seen the actor being surprised on stage, finding out how he was.
I loved Awkwafina. She was so funny.
Yeah. So, I was the only one that seemed to have any hope for this one, and I was proven right. The only thing I was wrong was I thought it was Fin Fang Foom who was the dragon.
Same. Yes. They kept teasing, and I was like, it's time, it's coming. No, we'll wait some more. We'll get there.
Yeah, I was at the premiere, and I was talking to Kevin Feige, and I said, well, at least you bring in Fin Fang. And he goes, well, not exactly.
I mean, Fin Fang Foom.
You did mention Pip the Troll, though, and you were pleasantly surprised.
Yes.
Yeah, I do feel like Pip and Eros are a bigger what than Fin Fang Foom even, which is saying something.
Well, I have been lobbying Kevin for like the last 4 years for Pip.
Yeah.
And he's been able to keep his mouth shut.
But he also wanted Tom Cruise to play Pip the Troll.
That is the exclusive of this panel. I can't top that. That's going to conclude our time, and he is the right height for Pip the Troll. I love that so much. Let's give it up for Jim Starlin and Jaime Jameson, folks. Check out Dreadstar Returns. If you want to see people creating live, that's the book. It's so special. It's amazing. Thank you all so much.
This is John Glover, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Lionel Luther recommends it. Have some fun. Follow your fandom.